Hey, what is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, speaking your blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles and a solution for someone's problem. As always, you're listening to me and now watching me too once in a while. I am your host and producer of the Dr. Vibe Show. I'm also host and co-producer of the Dr. Vibe Show and a few other things. Also, host and co-producer of the Goodman Project Show that's on once a month at thegoodmanproject.com. You're listening and watching to the Sports Vibe, and we're doing this as a little test to see how it rolls. It's been rolling so well so far. We'll just keep it going. So we got Brenden Whitted on our line tonight. Sportsman, loves the sports, plays the sports, broadcasts the sports, and he's joining us for another episode of the Sports Vibe. So how's things going?
Things are going great. This is really the time in sports. There's so many different sports and different events going on. And look, the crown jewel of all sports is coming up Sunday, and it's T minus 48 hours or whatever it is for Super Bowl. So I'm jacked for that.
Nice, nice, and yeah, we are going to get to it in the last part of our conversations tonight. So first up, and we'll not spend too much time on it, Tiger Woods today shooting an 82. And, I mean,
Yeah,
the worst two rounds of his professional career, didn't make the cut. What's going on with Tiger? Is Tiger done?
it's weird that we keep having this conversation. It seems like every year this is supposed to be the year he kind of breaks out of the slump. And look, let's give it a little bit of context. 2 years ago, he was the Tour's Player of the Year. I think that he just had such a run of dominance in the early 2000s that we began to expect him to win, which is a preposterous notion in golf when you're going against an open field, against a slew of competitors. It's ridiculous what he was able to do. I mean, just no one's had a run like that from around 2000 to around 2002. No one's ever had that, and I'll stake my claim now saying I think Tiger Woods is the best golfer ever. I know he doesn't have as many majors as Jack Nicklaus or as many overall victories as Sam Snead. I think eventually he may catch Snead, but I think that golf is much more universal now. I think that it's much more accessible now, and I think the level of his competition overall is much higher than Jack Nicklaus. People point to Nicklaus's major records a record in majors in terms of his overall wins as that is the crown jewel and that is the reason that he's the best. But you can look at the number of second place finishes he has, and I think that not only talks about his talent, but just kind of just the general talent that he was facing on a more regular basis. And I think Tiger just overall has faced more because just the game is more accessible. But yeah, the Phoenix Open was not kind to him at all. He slimmed down, lost some weight, and has changed his swing yet again. We'll see if this is just the kind of the pains of change, or if this is really more of the decline that we've seen from Tiger a little bit. But it's tough not having him on Sundays and watching him kind of fall apart on moving day. So hopefully this isn't a trend. Hopefully this is just one of those growing pains as he tries to change his game yet again.
Yeah, it's a more a discussion than we'll get at today, but I think a lot of it is psychologically for him, and I think also he ain't young anymore, and his body's gone through a lot.
That's true. Yeah, injuries. It doesn't even though it's quote unquote just golf. I mean that is still a sport, and it is extremely strenuous, especially when you go with knee and back issues that he's had for so long.
And the personal issues, but that's a whole other story. So we'll fly off of that, and we know we can't do a sports vibe with you on it without getting the boxing update. So what's going on in the squared circle?
Okay, so last week I told you guys about Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado. They were finishing up their trilogy. Rios took the first one, Alvarado the second, and the third was supposed to be one full of fireworks because you have two warriors. In the third one, it was all Rios. It ended after the third round as a TKO with Alvarado finishing yet another fight on his stool. Just couldn't come out. He admitted as much afterwards that he just didn't prepare properly for this fight. Rios, to his credit, looked as good as I've seen Rios in a really, really long time. Alvarado, between the first two fights that, even though he said won the second fight against Rios, those two fights were punishing regardless. They were some really, really physically taxing bouts. And then his fight against Ruslan Provodnikov, who is an all-offense, come forward, absolutely beat you up kind of fighter. Between those three fights, he's taken a lot of punishment, and even though he's earned earn the reputation as a warrior, I think that every boxer has a certain amount of punches they can take, and no one knows what that number is. But the more I've seen Alvarado in the fight his last 4 or 5 fights, the more I feel that maybe he's really past his prime. In addition to he had some out of the ring stuff. Now this was Rios's best fight in a long time. This was really the Rios that I wanted to see versus Pacquiao. Pacquiao outclassed him completely when they fought, and he kind of showed the difference between a good fighter and a great fighter. Speaking of Pacquiao, Bob Arum, his promoter, mentioned earlier today that this is the fight between he and Mayweather is imminent, which is the most tangible representation of this fight actually coming to fruition that we've had since it first started getting talked about 4 or 5 years ago. So I know that people might be over it, but boxing fans shouldn't be, because they're still the best at their weights. They're still pound for pound some of the best fighters that we have and have ever seen, both Hall of Fame fighters. I'm still very much looking forward to it. If you're talking about a fight that I'm looking for, that's the second fight that I'm looking for. The first fight that I'm looking for is Triple G, Gennady Golovkin versus Andre Ward. Now, Andre Ward has had some promoter issues of his own. He's only fought twice in the last 2 years. Triple G has fought 7 times in that same time span. But pound for pound, those are the best fighters that I've seen in a while, including Mayweather, Andre Ward, and Golovkin. Both powerful, both quality boxers. We're talking about 160 to 168 pound range, somewhere in there. So Andre Ward's 168 pounds. Golovkin usually fights at the middleweight at 160. They might have to fight at a catch weight, but that to me is by far and away the absolute best of the best in terms of fights that I want to see. But Pacquiao Mayweather is a close second, and hopefully we'll get that sometime in May.
Now, is a Pacquiao, you're passionate about it, but is it still a fight worth watching? And
absolutely. Why? Well, because they're still both great fighters. Look, Pacquiao doesn't have the knockout power that he possessed earlier in his career. There was a stint there where if you stood in the ring with Pacquiao and made it 12 rounds, you deserved a parade thrown in your honor. He was that kind of power puncher with both hands. He's an unorthodox fighter that hits you with both hands and hits you with both hands for power. Recently, he hasn't really had that kind of stopping power, but his quickness and his speed and his ability and his just unorthodox style in general, it still presents problems to pretty much everyone. And Mayweather is the ultimate tactician, one of, if not the best defensive fighters we've ever seen with that shell defense. He dictates pace. He dictates where you fight in the ring. He commands space. And he's an absolute magician in the ring. It will be a very, very good fight. I know it's difficult for people to believe that, even after all these so close, almost, maybe they'll fight, maybe they won't, for the last little soap opera of 4 or 5 years that we've had. Trust me, this would still be a very quality fight between 2 very quality fighters. Perhaps not as good as it would have been a couple or a few years ago, but still very, very fun to watch.
I'm sure that the gate and the purse will be just out of control. I don't know if it would be the biggest purse of all time, but I'm sure it'll be top 10 for sure.
That's what always gave me, I know a lot of people thought that this fight would never happen. Look, there's too much money to be made for these two not to get in the ring. It's Mayweather. It's literally Mayweather's middle name. So, I was never under the impression that Mayweather, especially at the tail end of his career, was going to leave 60, 70, 80 million dollars just lying. No, nothing about him says that's what he's going to do. I know he wants to keep that sterling record, being undefeated, intact. But I think he's willing to risk it. And keep this in mind. People talk about him being afraid or not afraid. First off, I would never, ever call a boxer afraid, because they possess something inside them that I simply don't have to even get into that sport and rise to that level. But there's a reason that he's undefeated. We can talk about he didn't want to fight, or this person didn't want. There's no reason for him to fear anyone, because I've never seen a fighter make great fighters and very good fighters look so mediocre as Mayweather does on a continuous basis. So I think that this really has been a situation where Mayweather, if he's nothing else, he's a businessman. He realized that he could garner more leverage later in Pacquiao's career, because he's not the pay-per-view draw that he used to be, and get more of a higher percentage of this fight's gate. And I really think that had more to do with it than anything.
Good stuff. Well, we'll anticipate hopefully the next time we do a Sports 5 that fight will be a done deal. Well, let's move on to Serena Williams in the time zone that you and I are on, about 8, 9 hours time. We'll be paying for another Grand Slam championship against probably her biggest nemesis during her career, Maria Sharapova. And Serena just keeps on going. 33 years old, still #1 in the world, still winning, beating the lady she beat in the semifinals was 18 years old.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about Serena, man?
To me, she's one of the great athletes that I've been fortunate enough to watch. She's up there with Sampras and Federer and Jordan and Tiger and Gretzky. Like, she's up there with the greats. You start talking about Mount Rushmores for individual sports. She's absolutely on women's tennis. You talked about her age, her being 33. Especially in women's tennis, that's amazing. She's got 5 Grand Slams since turning 30. That's the most in the Open era. So you want to talk about an athlete taking care of her body, being focused, and I think we've talked about this a little bit.
And all the comebacks, all her injury comebacks too.
Exactly. To have the desire to still want to do it. Like, athletes, when they get older and they get in the winter of their careers, they talk about, it's not that I don't love the sport anymore. It's that fact that I don't love all the things leading up to the big shot or the big championship game or the big moment. I didn't want to do all the preparation. The fact that she's not only willing to, but still able to strap it up and be in that type of complete physical, she like you were talking about, she was playing someone that was over a decade younger than her and still beat her in straight sets. I mean, that's amazing. And you talk about Sharapova, one of the #2 in the world, fantastic. And while I was doing research for this, I realized that Sharapova hadn't beaten her in 10 years. She hasn't beaten her in 15 matches.
I know that.
I mean, it is crazy. That is absolutely insane. That sort of dominance over a competitor like Sharapova. There are very few accolades and very few superlatives that I can throw out that would do her justice, other than to say it's fantastic watching her. And if you have an opportunity, please avail yourself to do that, because she's amazing.
Well, it's interesting. She is one of my all-time favorite athletes because, for so many reasons, her size and what she's able to do and her quickness. But what really makes me admire her is her mental toughness. Like, when you watch Serena and she gets down into it and gets focused like that, it just blows my mind. Her intensity and her passion to win is just incredible. And it would have been really something. Her sister and her almost met in the semifinals, the Australian Open, and that would have been great and crazy. But one of the things this year, I don't think he was supposed to come to Toronto. Unfortunately, he didn't. Her father was supposed to come to Toronto and promote a book that he's just written. And there isn't an individual that I'm sure you would love to sit down and have a conversation with, to have 2 daughters who have been dominant. And if anyone wants to take that word from me, fight it out. Dominant in their sport. Just amazing. Like, Serena's supposed to be playing this summer at the Canadian Open. I've always promised myself that I've wanted to see her play, so I'm speaking that I'll get a chance to see her. I did see Maria Navratilova play, who was another one, an athlete that I really admire too. But Serena is, like, if she wins this one, I think she passes Chris Evert in Grand Slams. I'm not sure about that, but she's just phenomenal. I mean, in just the thought process to be able to stay at the top of your game for so long, male or female.
Right, exactly. And you brought up Richard Williams. If I definitely remember when they first came in to tennis, they weren't very well received. They thought about them being loud and obnoxious and wanting too much, and they decried the father for not wanting them to play junior tennis. And to his credit, he said no, they're going to have other interests, they're going to do other things, and they were criticized for that for a long time with their interest in acting or fashion that both of them have. And I think that those sorts of things, what's kept the desire to play tennis fresh. I think a lot of her contemporaries fell off because that's all they did from the time they were about 13 to about their mid-20s. It was only about tennis all of the time from their formative years on. And, after a while, they just didn't want to play anymore. I think the fact that Serena and Venus both had other things that interest them and that they became well-rounded people, I thought that shows that is a reason why they're both still playing and still love the game and are still willing to get out there and put it on the line, is because of honestly the vision of their parents, and to be able to come from Compton and to do the things that they've done. That's a remarkable story. You could write that story down and it would absolutely be storybook.
Absolutely. Before we get on to the Super Bowl, if you had one question to ask Serena Williams, what would it be?
Probably for a number. No, I would think.
Line up.
I would probably think that I just want to know about something about her mental fortitude, like when she's having those tough games or those tough sets, what it is that she's thinking about, what she's digging into, what specifically she digs into to get through it and to fight through it and to just know that she's going to overcome this. Like that whole part, the mentality of a true champion, of a true great. I don't even know how you bottle that, and I'd love to just get her to sit down and tell me what that would be like.
Good stuff. Well, big game on Sunday. Let's talk about it. So let's break it down. So let's do it this way. So let's compare Patriots offense, Seattle offense. Who has the advantage?
I think the Patriots are slightly more explosive, and I would say that mostly because of the presence of a healthy Robert Gronkowski. Because in past years when they made their playoff runs, they didn't have that, and that really, while he's not a true vertical threat in the fact that he's just going to be a speed demon, he does give them more of a powerful passing attack than I think Brady has had in quite some time. So I think that if you were just to compare straight up their offenses, that makes them a little bit more dynamic, because even though Baldwin's good and Curse is solid, neither of those guys are really scary, and especially when you start coupling them with the corresponding defenses outside of Marshawn Lynch and Russell Wilson, there's not a lot in that offense in terms of just star players that scares an opposition's defensive coordinator. So if you're going to give edge up, I'd go to Patriots.
Defense.
Oof, man, I really love both of these defenses. A lot has been made of Legion of Boom, and rightfully so. I mean, a guy like Maxwell, who is a fantastic corner in his own right, is completely overshadowed by Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas. Like, those guys in that secondary do so many great things. One of the really, really cool things that I love about the secondary for Seattle is a lot of talk has been made about the Seahawks and their desire to play zone, that they play zone. And that is true to an extent. Between the numbers, they do play zone. They love to jam-pack as many guys as they can. Cam Chancellor is actually helped by their corners and their ability to go on an island. Outside those numbers, those corners line up, and they pretty much take care of themselves. You got Earl Thomas up over high, just kind of overseeing things as the free safety, but Cam Chancellor is able to move in that very small area, play in a zone, and just kind of be an enforcer that's roaming. And I think that it'll be fun to watch how he matches up, how KJ Wright, the linebacker, matches up against Gronkowski moving forward. That said, there are some absolute stars and studs on that Patriots side. Jamie Collins, that linebacker, Dante Hightower, in addition to Revis and Browner, they're a lot of fun to watch. I'm going to go with the Patriots being slightly better or slightly more star-driven on defense. I think collectively Seattle was better on defense, especially because they played together for so long. But in terms of just stars, I think the Patriots have more stars. But if I'm taking one defense, I'm going to take Seattle.
Coaching.
Whew, man, yeah, it's hard to go against Belichick. Look, you can make the argument that he's the best coach ever. His sixth appearance in the Super Bowl. It's his resume speaks for itself. It really does. I'll say that Pete Carroll, there's something special about Pete Carroll. There's the youth, and part of it is his personality. I mean, let's be honest. Pete Carroll's got that youthful exuberance, and you never guess that guy's 60+ years old. He has he calls the special teams. he calls the fake field goal and that gets Seahawks their first touchdown against Green Bay. I mean, he's a gutsy guy, but you can't go against Belichick. I mean, in everything that he's done, he's seen absolutely everything. And the ability for the Patriots to change with their opponent. If we'll beat you throwing the ball, we'll beat you running the ball, we'll beat you low-scoring game, high-scoring game, low on turnovers every single year. It's very, very impressive. They're a very well-coached team. In terms of complete body of work, there's really no question. Bill Belichick has put out a better resume.
Special teams.
Special teams is always such a weird thing to try to predict. It's much like turnovers, especially you're talking about a single game format. It's so difficult to predict what is going to happen on special teams. It's like, as I was mentioning in the Green Bay game, who's going to predict a fake field goal who's going to predict a fake field goal into a touchdown that gets them back into the game? But I do believe that turnovers and field goal and that whole special teams, that's really where this is going to come down to. Because every time I look at these teams and I look at their numbers, I think this is going to be pretty much a low-scoring affair, especially early. I think that this is going to be a single-digit game going into the fourth quarter. I think after a while, because both teams are going to have the desire and the ability to run the ball with power, with Marshawn Lynch or LeGarrette Blount for Seattle and the Patriots respectively, I think eventually even these defenses will tire up front. But I don't see a whole bunch of scoring. I don't see a lot of long scoring drives. I think there are going to be a couple big plays, even though neither team really gives up big plays. I think eventually something's going to happen. There's going to be either a special teams gaffe or a turnover, which, again, very, very difficult to predict those sorts of things. But I think it's going to be such a coin flip game that I think it's going to come down to something that we're not expecting, because I keep looking at these teams, and they look very, very similar to me.
If Seattle needs to win, they need to do blank.
If Seattle's going to win, it's going to be the effectiveness of their zone read run. That's really the most interesting thing to me. The Patriots play Miami, who run some zone read, but not nearly as much as Seattle. They've had varying success against it as a defense. It's going to be interesting to see what they're willing to give up. The zone read is pretty much just the quarterback reading the defensive end and the linebackers. If the defensive end crashes down to the running back, Russell Wilson will more likely keep it and try to get outside to the perimeter. I'm thinking that Bill Belichick would rather Marshawn Lynch try to run into the bevy of bodies up the middle somewhere rather than let Russell Wilson get on the perimeter and start making those Russell Wilson plays. I don't believe that he'll want him to do that. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens, how they match up, if they're going to have these spies that are going to spy Russell Wilson, and maybe in third down situations. I think one of the keys is going to be Seattle not getting these third and long situations where they're not able to run the ball, where they're not able to kind of keep the Patriots back on their heels. If they're in a lot of third and longs like they were against Green Bay, I can't really foresee them getting any headway in terms of scoring. Obviously, in a defensive battle that I'm predicting, field position is going to be huge. So making sure that even if you're not, I think there are going to be a couple drives that are going to use a boxing analogy, just going to be kind of jabs. Like, no, these aren't going to score any points, but it's going to be important in order to hurt the defense or to weaken the defense and to give your defense a chance for a breather. I think those drives are going to be really, really important. Maybe just pick up a first down or two to make sure that the field position doesn't switch on you, and to make sure your defense gets a good solid rest for their turn up on the field.
For New England to win, what do they need to do?
I think it's going to come down to Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady having a big game, throwing the ball. Big is relative in this particular game. I don't think he's going to go for 300 yards or anything like that. But key throws, connecting with Gronkowski is going to be major, because every time I look at Edelman or Amendola, their two best wide receivers, it's difficult for me to think that they're going to beat Richard Sherman or Maxwell. Keep this in mind as well. Tom Brady, and one of the great things about Super Bowl is you get to see all these tendencies kind of come together for one single game. Tom Brady doesn't particularly do well in terms of his percentage throwing to the right side of the field, which in this case is Richard Sherman's side. They quarter off and have sides of the field most likely. Seattle kind of lines up and does what it does unless you do whatever you want to. So it wouldn't surprise me if Sherman didn't get a lot of balls. maybe they test him a little bit early in terms of his injury, whether or not his shoulder, his elbow injury has healed. Also, Earl Thomas's shoulder injury, whether or not he's healthy with that. I'm sure they'll try to figure out, excuse me, exactly how healthy those guys are, because it's been 2 weeks, but they still did get injured in the NFC Championship game. But I wouldn't be surprised if Sherman doesn't see a lot of balls, especially early.
Do you think the total score will be over 42?
I think it will be over 42. I said that I thought it would be single digits headed into the fourth quarter. I think there'll be an exchange of a few field goals on either side, but I think that eventually they'll wear down those defenses, and you'll see a little bit more scoring in the fourth quarter. I think it's going to be close, though. I mean, I could see this game being 3 points or 7 points one way or the other, and it still being primarily the same game in the early parts. I'm going to go with Seattle because I think that Russell Wilson's a better quarterback at this stage of his career than Tom Brady is. And in a coin flip game, just give me the better quarterback because he's going to have more of an effect on the game.
Well, it's very interesting because I was just finished watching Ron Jaworski on ESPN, and he's predicting, was he saying something like 35-20 or 34-20 for New England?
Wow.
He thinks the better quarterback, the hotter quarterback coming into the game right now is Tom Brady.
Well, I mean, as long as they check the air pressure before the game, I think Russell Wilson's got a real chance.
Just as we close up, do you think the NFL is ever going to come down with a ruling on that, or are they just going to let it fade away?
This reminds me so much of the Spygate thing where they saw the tape and then burned it, and then they kind of gave him a slap on the wrist, and that was pretty much it. And it's kind of lived more in infamy than anything else. And I kind of feel like that's what's going to happen. Look, we talked about it last time. If you interview 40 people and still haven't talked to Tom Brady about what's going on with this, you don't really want to know what happened. And I think that the NFL understood that any sort of real scandal in terms of something that materially affected the game or the integrity of the game, if something really happened in that or the Ravens game, and they found out the week preceding the Super Bowl, it would just ruin it would ruin the season for them. It really, really would, and ruin further seasons for them. And I think it's too expensive to have a real investigation of what happened. I think that the game will be played. They'll find some person that is not Tom Brady or Bill Belichick liable. That person will be disciplined. The Patriots will be reprimanded in some small and menial way, and they'll just kind of just be like, okay, well, we'll see you at combine time. I think that's kind of it's going to be business as usual for the NFL because finding anything serious would just be too expensive.
All right. Well, it's another edition of the Sports Vibe. Brenden is picking Seattle. Do you have a score?
Wow. Okay. I'm gonna take a score. I'm gonna give me 27-21.
Okay.
Yeah, that 27-21. I'm gonna go with that 27-21 Seattle.
All right. MVP.
Marshawn Lynch. I think that he's got to have a big game. I really do think that he's going to be a consistent presence for this team. He has been for all season. He was their most consistent player last game versus the Packers. And whether or not it's him running the ball or him catching the ball, he's shown the ability to flank out and not only catch the ball but run routes in the slot receiver position. So I have a hard time believing that even the Patriots will be able to stop him for 4 quarters.
All right. Well, that's another edition of the Sports Vibe. Brenden, where can people catch you?
You can catch me on Twitter very easily at WBHUalum. That's at WBHUALUM. And you can also catch me on the Sports Shop from 9 to 11. Just go to thesportsshopradio.com and click listen 9 to 11 a.m. on Saturdays.
Excellent. Well, another edition of the Sports Vibe. We're enjoying it. Hope you are too. I'm Dr. Vibe, your host and producer of the Dr. Vibe Show, host and co-producer of the Good Men Project Show and other things online. As I always like to say, God bless. No, you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles and you're a solution for someone's problem. God bless, peace be all, and keep the faith. Catch you next week. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Don't eat too much. Bye-bye.